He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matthew?
Yo, welcome back for Season 2, Episode 40 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Things me and the rest of the world were focused on last week. 44-year-old Phillip Rivers came out of a very long hiatus and nearly led the Colts to a win against a really good Seahawks team on Sunday. The MLB winter meetings were eventful, and they left us with a couple of new mega deals inked, but many more still on the table. The fantasy football playoffs have hit. The Oklahoma City Thunder looked like they might never lose again, but the big plot twist last Saturday was that they would get dropped by the Spurs. And the cruelest irony is San Antonio would go on to lose to the Knicks in the NBA Cup final on Tuesday. And this week, let's crack it open with Fantasy Football Friday's freaking injury reports and who you might be able to pick up to survive and advance. The first thing you have to do with your fantasy football team, if you suffered injuries, is to not panic. If you're a Chiefs enjoyer, first of all, I really hope you aren't, but if you are, you probably saw the dynasty torn asunder when Patrick Mahomes went down with the torn ACL and LCL. Jayden Daniels is another big injury to know with the Commanders. I had him on both of my teams, and he's now been ruled out for the rest of the year. I don't think I'm all in on Marcus Mariota, though, considering they also lost Zach Ertz, their top tight end, a couple of weeks ago. You start doing the math, and you're like, okay, who's going to catch the ball outside of Terry McLaurin? We were moving away from the Commanders. If your starting QB did go down, you might want to be a tiny bit thankful and hold out hope because there are so many viable quarterback options you can get on waivers. It's important to remember that unless you have some very liberal league rules, everyone is past the trade deadline, so the only way to make additions or subtractions to your team is through the waiver wire. I really try to give tips at all different levels, and by thinking and talking about them, I get kind of smarter and give myself some very necessary reminders as a fantasy player, so I'm not just meaning to state the obvious. Now, what if there's a totally non-injury related change to a team? That happened. That's one of those hypotheticals that have become realities in weeks 15 to 18 or so, where the season is at. There's one that just smacked everybody upside the head. A man making $53 million a year to unfortunately throw the most interceptions in the league. Tua Tagovailoa has just been benched for the Dolphins. It came right after their Monday night loss to the Steelers. Another one of those cold weather games where it looked like Miami was just defeated before halftime. So you can't play Tua, not that you would. And you definitely don't want to play the Dolphins' Quinn Ewers. Others around the league that you can't play, Mahomes, obviously. Kyler Murray was never activated from IR with the Cardinals, so his season is done. And that's why Jacoby Brissett is my number one priority add if he's still available. I am still shocked by his consistency since Kyler went down. He hasn't been below 19 points or above 25 in any game so far, and that's been since week 6. And Marvin Harrison Jr. has missed a couple of games in there. I finally decided I need him in one of my lineups, even over Brock Purdy, and I'm pretty excited to trot him out. Rashee Rice is missing practice with concussion symptoms, and the Chiefs are eliminated. I think there's plenty of reason to think that they're going to sit him for the rest of the year, and even if they don't, that they would limit his snap count and his involvement. I like Xavier Worthy, not because he's produced anything this year, but because he's probably the fastest man in football, and he can take a 5-yard throw from Gardner Minshew, Mahomes' backup, 75 yards to the house. Don't rely on Minshew fantasy-wise, but Worthy has a very good matchup with the Titans on Sunday. He is under 500 yards for the year with a single touchdown, but I would still add and stash him even if Rashee Rice is active, just in case he is Minshew's favorite target and makes some big plays. The Bears ruled out receivers Rome Odunze and Luther Burden on Thursday afternoon. I'm not going to tell you to pick up other Bears receiving options because that can be very frustrating. Only caveat is that DJ Moore will see higher volume by default as he's caught 3 or fewer passes in 7 out of 14 games this year. I'll tell you that they keep dominating on the ground, and Kyle Monangai is arguably my favorite backup running back right now. How many other backups are getting 15 carries a game? DeAndre Swift is dealing with a groin injury, and he isn't guaranteed to play on Saturday against the Packers. That's right, Saturday. Remember how that happens around the weekends that the schedules start to get pretty funky. Swift has a shorter turnaround than normal, and that can always cause problems. If DeAndre Swift is unavailable, you're probably looking at almost 30 carries going to Kyle Monangai. Great injury insurance, and he still has standalone value. And lastly, the Saints' Alvin Kamara has been shelved since early in Week 12 with knee and ankle injuries. Their situation is so odd in so many ways. Devin Neal got his time to shine as the de facto starting running back in Weeks 12 to 15, and now he's likely to miss the rest of the year with a hamstring issue. What I think they should do is turn the bulk of the touches over to Audric Estime, the second-year back out of Notre Dame, who has a fantastic matchup against the hapless Jets this week. But that assumes that there's no Kamara or Neal. If you think that's going to happen, then Estime is a great add. What they might actually do is finally involve their favorite chess piece, Taysom Hill, in the run game a little bit, mix in their other rostered running back, Evan Hall, and even involve some of their receivers on gadget runs. Estime is the riskiest recommendation out of all of them this week, but hey, your roster is already supposed to be stacked if you're in the playoffs, and each player in the lineup is only 1/9 of the puzzle. What else is going on? Tarik Skubal just announced he'll be pitching for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic. Not at all the kind of news anybody thought they would be hearing about him anytime soon. Still, it's going to be both of the Cy Young winners at the top of that rotations, with Paul Skenes committing way back in May. The last tourney back in 2023 saw the U.S. take runners up to Japan, and in a shocking and unexpected turn of events there, Shohei Ohtani won the MVP that time. If there were ever a year where the U.S. should just run away with this, it's 2026. March 6th is the team's first game in Brazil, and one of the thoughts in the back of my mind is, which one of these guys gets to start that opening game, Skenes or Skubal? You already know the numbers between the two of them. They are the two best pitchers alive, and Skubal was an almost unanimous Cy Young winner, losing out on 4 first-place votes to the Red Sox' Garrett Crochet, while Skenes actually was unanimous. And I guess the Giants ace Logan Webb is going to have to vie against the Twins ace Joe Ryan for the number 3 starter spot. That is a pretty darn good problem to have. Ryan had a career-best year last year, a 3.42 ERA, and struck out 5 to every 1 walk. Webb led the majors in innings for the 3rd consecutive year. He also led in starts made, batters faced, and most hits given up. That last one is all just about his style, though. It's where he lives in the zone and he always limits the damage. The roster's starting to look like a full starting lineup for an all-star team at this point, too. Cal Raleigh and Will Smith, the consensus 2 best catchers alive, really. Corbin Carroll, Aaron Judge, Pete Crow Armstrong in the outfield. A ton of power there. And Judge, of course, serving as the captain. Kyle Schwarber, 56 home runs at DH. Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt Jr. at shortstop. That has got to be the biggest embarrassment of riches at any one position on one team ever. Japan will have Ohtani again as both a pitcher and a hitter, so they defaultly have a chance. They're also adding the rest of the Dodgers' big 3. I think it's safe to call them that now after the World Series, right? Of Roki Sasaki, probably out of the bullpen, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, probably as a starter. Certain bats within the USA lineup have a habit of going cold in the big moments, like Judge and Will Smith to a degree, and the Dodgers pitching trio showed that they're exactly the opposite in the World Series, where they shone like gold when they had to. It's always easy to predict a Team USA win, and they usually go in with a stacked team on paper, but it becomes a little bit easier with Skubal joining Paul Skenes somewhere around the top of the rotation as the 2 best pitchers on earth on the same team. Next up, the WNBPA, the Players Association of the WNBA, announced this week that they are prepared to strike. Not strike like lash out, of course, but call a strike and create a work stoppage when and if their labor concerns aren't resolved this offseason. It would be the first work stoppage in the history of the league. Compare that to the NBA that's had 4 significant ones, or the NFL that's had something like 5 to my knowledge, depending on how you count them, and then the MLB that's had 9 total. That used to be rather commonplace. Of course, this league hasn't been around as long, but the more you think that, oh wait, organizing a strike is actually not that hard, the more you wonder if this might be the perfect time. All of these records continue to be broken across the W every year between their media rights deals, franchise total valuations, biggest endorsement deals to players probably being the number one way of making up this gap between what the players are worth and what their contracts are actually paying them. The list of things that any new collective bargaining agreement would have to have would probably be incomplete without these things. Higher maximum and minimum salaries, It's already been thrown around that the Supermax ceiling would be something maybe around $1 million a year, essentially quadrupling what it is right now. The veterans minimum in some plans could go above what the Supermax is right now. And you know something, I'm no good at math, but it just seems like wizardry to a degree to expect that right away. I was surprised reading this, but I'll link an article from ESPN on it. True revenue sharing is at the heart of players' issues too. I learned some of this from the same article, and it sounds like the cap was set to increase by 3% per team per year from January 2020 when the CBA was signed to 2027 when it was supposed to run out. Let's think what happened between January 2020 and now that really affected valuations. It's obviously been the most prosperous period and the fastest growth that the league has ever seen. This little 3% increase, it just doesn't leave any room for the kind of growth that seems like it should have organically followed in terms of contracts. The Players Union opted out of the current CBA in October of last year, and although it wasn't terminated immediately, it shortened the timeline to basically just cover this past season, and it mandates that something change before the coming season, even as a 6-week extension into January of 2026 just came down. Pay has clearly not expanded in accordance with the growth of the league and franchises. I think I like this stat the best to outline that. The Las Vegas Aces were bought in 2021 for $2 million, and their valuation is right now put at about $310. In that same time frame, the highest paid 2021 player, Sue Bird, made $221K, while the highest paid 2025 player, Kelsey Mitchell, made $269K. Both the floors and the ceilings are going to have to move for the league to play at all, really, in the coming year, one would think. But it seems the system is even more broken than that. Even as a WNBA casual, I might have more thoughts on this issue by the new year or so when it comes down to crunch time again. And I will get this whole recording done before the Thursday Night Football game this time, I promise. I'm going to put out predictions for it just to help motivate me to do so. It should be one of the best games of the whole year, not just for a Thursday night. I mean, on paper, I'm so excited. The Rams and Seahawks are meeting with identical 11-3 records, and that by itself is pretty rare. It's even better to see that it's a divisional game. The NFC West is so much better than it should be, and everyone except the Cardinals has kind of dramatically over-delivered. In fact, it just crossed my mind when I looked at the current standings that this is almost analogous to last year's NFC North, where the Packers, Vikings, and Lions all made the playoffs, and then the 7 seed had 11 wins. Both Seattle and LA finished with 10 wins last year, so they've already topped their records. Plus, the Niners are one of the most injured teams around, and they have 10 wins. That is with an absolute revolving door most places on that lineup outside of Christian McCaffrey. All three of the good teams in the NFC West have been getting outstanding quarterback play too. Let's talk about Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold. They're relatively far apart in age. Stafford's almost 38, Darnold is 28. But there are a ton of similarities between both of them when Stafford was young, if you follow me. No one ever thought that this would be the comparison Darnold was going to draw early in his career because he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. In 2020 and 2021 combined, he started 24 games, threw for 18 touchdowns to 24 interceptions. It was only last year with the Vikings that Sam Darnold ever started to look like a full-time NFL starter, and he's on a similar pace this year, though a tad down in most everything. Matthew Stafford was a gunslinger when he was young, a chuck and duck quarterback. He kind of was like that young, really strong-arm pitcher who doesn't have the full arsenal developed yet, but man, he has this awesome fastball, and guys, have you seen it? He just didn't know exactly where it was going to go and hadn't developed the secondary pitches. But Stafford matured into one of the smartest, most efficient pocket quarterbacks ever, and he's basically second to Aaron Rodgers in every passing stat that matters among actives. Or at least he was, ironically, until Phillip Rivers unretired. Now Sam Darnold is on that same sort of arc of his career, just at a little bit of a lower trajectory. I don't think he's ever going to have that kind of ceiling where Matt Stafford is now that looks like he's going to win MVP. But man, Darnold, from where he started with the Jets, he is a different player. He's in a different world. These guys are both benefiting from insane seasons out of their number one wide receivers, as Jackson Smith-Njigba and Puka Nacua are first and second in the league in yardage. Other things to note about this matchup, both defenses are also great. Seattle is second in scoring defense at 17.3 points. The Rams just behind that at 18.6. Devontae Adams is doubtful for this game, and that is huge. He had a hamstring injury on Sunday against the Lions, meaning even more of the Rams' hopes rest on the world's favorite receiver, Puka Nacua. Stafford is notorious for feeding his number one guy. Calvin Johnson and Cooper Kupp both had some MVP-type numbers because of him doing that. Predictions start here. Puka is going to have to handle at least 15 targets, and he's likely going to end up with double-digit catches. Fantasy managers rejoice, even against the difficult on-paper matchup. I also think the Rams' Colby Parkinson will have a really good shot at getting in the end zone again. I have almost picked him up off of waivers in fantasy a couple of times. This guy has 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games, with 5 or more targets in all but 2 of them. In this tight end environment, where it's literally Trey McBride and then everybody else, that is quite a heater. Plus, he scored against Seattle the last time these two met in Week 11. Speaking of that last time they met, Darnold threw 4 interceptions and no touchdowns in that one, and still only lost by 2. I could definitely see a similar performance Thursday, with rain and wind in the forecast and a high around 50. That might mean that you want to, even though Jason Myers is K1 by a whole lot, I am actually benching him this week. And I think I'm going to drop him. It hurts to do so because he is just far and away the best kicker, but I don't like that weather. I'm told like 50 is what qualifies as cold when you don't live in the Midwest, so man, are these guys just not built for it? I don't trust it. Again, Jackson Smith-Njigba, JSN, he's wide receiver 1 overall in the league, and Rams legend Cooper Kupp is an awfully distant second on his own team with 519 yards. I do think that somehow, some way, the Rams defensive coordinator, Chris Shula, is going to force the ball to be thrown away from the man with 900-yard games on the year, being JSN. If for no other reason than it's a divisional opponent that they're familiar with, and Sam Darnold still kind of likes to stare down his target. I don't think Seattle is going to be able to resist dialing up some red zone plays for Cooper Kupp and getting him a touchdown against his old team. Lock in that Cooper Kupp receiving touchdown prop. Stafford has 37 touchdowns on the year, Darnold has 22, but I don't think either of them are going to leave this game with more than 1 added on, and they'll probably be sacked more than they have in any game this year. Let's say, roughly 5 apiece, especially because Seattle's starting tackle Charles Cross is out. Probably an ugly game, definitely a physical game, and let's give it a very similar score to their last matchup, Rams by 3, 20-17. And so ends Week 40. I'm in the middle of arena soccer season and having a blast with that. A handful of other things are going on, but my top priorities right now are the content grind, improving my portfolio, and of course job searching now that I'm done with my master's. I finally feel like I have the free time and energy on my hands to do it, and you can expect me to start bringing more guests on more regularly. Aligning my schedule with anyone else's just got a lot easier. Folks, we are just 12 more episodes from 2 full years of White Noise Sports. We're on Spotify, of course, but don't forget you can also listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and even YouTube through the modern miracle known as an RSS feed. And thanks for coming back week after week, or as always, if you're relatively new here, we are happy to have you. Either way, check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, at The Voice of Tanner, X, just Voice of Tanner, YouTube, the whole thing spelled out with spaces. You can feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you'd like, but I will not force that upon you. Catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 40 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, man?